Time. But welcome everybody. My name is John Gestel. I'm our client relations coordinator here at Royalty Exchange. Joining me as always is Rob Bernhard, our corporate counsel. And then we have Dayton O'Connor, who's our lead analyst. We do these once a quarter, go over questions, go over updates to the site, things that might be happening. For this webinar, we're going to be doing a kind of recap of last year and looking ahead to 2024, since this is our first webinar of the year. There's a couple of site updates we want to talk about and just let you guys know about features, things like that. Some changes in the music industry, which are good to be aware of. And then we'll do our open Q&A at the end. We'll go over the submitted questions, stuff like that. If you do have questions while we're moving through this, please submit them through our Q&A option rather than through the chat option. The Q&A option is just a little bit easier for us to manage the questions. So we're paying attention to that, not so much the chat. So welcome in. We'll get started here just so that we're not keeping everyone's morning. It shouldn't take too long. And yeah, if you do have questions, I do encourage you to send them in. So first, let's talk about site improvements. There's been a bunch of updates in the last few months, the most recent of which is an update to our favoriting option. So it gives you this nice pop-up here. Would you like to follow this listing? Yes, receive emails. No, don't receive emails. That's a one-time thing you click every time you favorite a listing. If you do it, then you get an update whenever there's activity on a listing. So it's a good way to keep up to date on stuff that you might be following. Stuff that hasn't been moving and you want to see if it does move, things like that. So just another handy way to keep in the loop. We've also improved our data charts. So those are dynamic now. You can click on a specific element of the chart and it will pop that out, give you specifics about just that element, things like that. So that's always improving. As royalty payors improve their data, we get to improve ours. So that's kind of a constant build. But we did just have a big update to that. I want to say in November was when that rolled out. So take a look at that. That should help quantify a lot of the data that we're presenting. We're also giving text asset breakdowns, much like our auctions used to be. For those of you who were here several years ago when we did exclusively auctions, we used to have nice breakdowns around what the content is, how it's been performing, specifics on the financials, stuff like that. So we brought that back and are rolling it out on a wider scale across all assets on the exchange eventually, but it is a bit of a slow process. So keep an eye out for those. Again, to things like CAGR rates, other kinds of growth rates, focuses of earnings, stuff like that. So it can be super helpful. And then, of course, adding more royalty paying entities into the fold. That's also kind of an ongoing build as we work with more companies, bring in more artists, work with more publishers, things like that. We have a couple of questions here about the YouTube stuff. So yeah, YouTube is a good example of different companies that we can bring in. So yeah, lots of site improvements. We do have some exciting stuff slated this year. I can't make too many promises or share too much because it's all in the works. We're hoping some big improvements to our administrative processes, which will mean faster payments, faster updates, which everyone likes faster money. So stay tuned for that stuff. Hopefully it happens this year. We got a couple things we got to work out first. So that's it for the site improvements. But again, like all this stuff is designed to help you all in making educated royalty investments. If you have stuff you'd like to see, stuff you like, do let us know. Your feedback is super helpful for us to know what to focus on, where to prioritize our efforts, even new ideas. So yeah, always send us your feedback, investors@royaltyexchange.com. Let us know. Next, let's talk about music industry updates. Two big ones I want to focus on this morning. The first is the acquisition of BMI. So for those of you who don't know, BMI is one of the two major performers' rights organizations in the United States. They're a company we work with often, them and ASCAP. And they were acquired by a company called New Mountain Capital. And they are basically moving from a nonprofit to a for-profit company. So what is this mean for BMI assets? We don't exactly know yet. The biggest impact to investors right now is that you're probably going to see less BMI catalogs coming up. So part of this change is that BMI has increased their assignment fees, which impacts like the level of qualified assets that we can bring onto the site. So that may impact there. It also could mean changes to their royalty payout structure. We don't exactly know yet. But it's something to keep note of. Changing from a nonprofit to for-profit for a royalty collection company is a pretty big deal. So we'll be keeping tabs on it this year, see how it all goes. Rob, Dane, I don't know if you guys have thoughts you want to add to that, but definitely worth keeping an eye on. No? Okay.
Nothing additional for me.
Cool. Cool. The other big one is the changes to streaming royalty payments and how that's calculated. Spotify, UMG, Universal Music Group, and Deezer, all three of them have adopted a two-tier system. Basically, what it means is that a track has to generate a certain level of streams before it will be eligible to pay royalties to the artists. In most cases, it's 1,000 streams. So this is a method for combating AI music and a lot of white noise music are the two big ones that these companies are concerned about. So the other change to that is Spotify's requiring white noise music or like, background music like that to be played longer before it qualifies for a play. I'm not exactly sure what the timing is. I think it's more like a minute versus 30 seconds, something like that. This is different from how their previous model was, where if it gets plays, it gets a piece of the pie. Some artists are mad about it, others not so much. Obviously, smaller artists are going to be impacted. People who get less than 1,000 streams aren't going to be making any money at all. But that also means that more qualified assets and bigger artists are going to be getting more royalties since the pie is going to be cut into less pieces. How does it impact royalty exchange investors? It doesn't really. Since we do have earnings qualifications for assets to get listed, most of them are generating more than 1,000 streams already, so it doesn't really impact what we're doing. But again, any kind of changes to royalty payment methods, things like that are stuff we want to keep a close eye on because it has the potential to impact royalty assets. So it is something that we'll keep watching, just like the BMI acquisition. But for now, just something that we want to watch. Rob, Dane, I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to the streaming updates. Nope. Cool. So there's one other music industry update that we have been preaching for, feels like forever now, and that's the CRB, Copyright Royalty Board, changes to, or updates, I should say, to the streaming mechanical royalty rate. So just last Friday, the MLC, the Music Licensing Collective, Mechanical Licensing Collective, excuse me, they sent out an email saying that they've started receiving the data for the prior period adjustments for the change in the Phono 3 underlying royalty rate. So for those of you that don't know, every 5 years, the royalty payout rate for streaming mechanical royalties gets re-examined and most oftentimes updated. So last time it was updated, which was in like 2017, they agreed to an interim rate on a move forward basis, which is from the 2018 to the 2022 period at 10.5% of streaming revenue for the royalty. Now that was designed to be an interim rate while they figured out what the appropriate rate was going to be. Now in August of last year, the Copyright Royalty Board decided, they're a legal body, they decided that that rate should be 15% instead of 10%. So that means that all the streaming mechanical royalties that were paid out from 2018 to 2022 were paid at a lesser rate than they should have been paid out. So there are all these adjustments and catch-up rates that we've been expecting since then, as the DSPs like Spotify, Apple Music will have to pay out what they owe to these artists. So this is really the first major update that we've seen about that. We were expecting it in February, so it's not a huge surprise. But basically, they said they've started receiving the adjustment data, which is a ton of data, and they expect to be paying out these adjustments this coming spring. So there is a publisher distribution in, I believe it's end of March, is when that happens normally. That most of them work on a biannual schedule. So maybe we'll see it then. If we do, great. But if not, those catch-up payments are imminent, which is exciting. So this is going to impact publishing catalogs with a high degree of streaming mechanical royalties. That's where you'll see the biggest impact. And again, it's for the 2018 to 2022 periods. So big news. We'll see how it all shakes out, but exciting for those of you who either own publishing catalogs that are generating stream mechanical royalties, or if you have your eye on any, now is probably a good time to pull the trigger because this is big news. Dayton, Rob, anything that you guys want to add to the CRB stuff, the updates, anything like that? Oh, cool. All right, yeah, so this is really the last big thing that I had lined up for you all as far as updates go. So we can move right along to the Q&A. Normally how we do this is we run through the submitted questions while you all have a chance to kind of put together any questions that you may have come up with during our talk. And maybe we'll answer some of your questions just inadvertently through these. And then, assuming there's no more, then we'll conclude, and that's great. So we'll just run from the top here going down. We got about 30 of them. Let's go one by one here. First question we have, can partial portion be financed? Are there any financial institutions that you were aware of? So we don't offer financing for royalty acquisitions. I'm not aware of any institutions that offer financing for royalty acquisitions. We get this question a lot. I've only heard of one investor who I've spoken with who was successful in acquiring financing from a bank. So if this is something you're considering and you successfully get financing, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. But I wouldn't say keep your hopes up. I don't hear about it very often. Next question here. I believe your contact is available when required. That will make a good investing deal, not for the investors, but for the, I'm not really sure what this question means. But yeah, we are always available. So if you have questions, reach out to us. Next here, what is the lowest amount you can bid on a catalog? That depends on the catalog. Any asset owner can set a minimum price for their holding. Generally, the rule of thumb for us is that you need at least $5,000 to really make an offer. Our baseline minimum is like between 1,000 and 2,500. So assume like a 2x from that for the 2,500, and that's really the lowest multiple you'll pay. So that brings you to 5K. So that's really the lowest you should expect, that $5,000 to $10,000 range. But it really depends on the catalog. Sometimes it can be higher or lower depending on how the catalog's performed. Next one here. What time do you open? Our office hours are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Mountain Time every day. But that being said, reach out to us anytime. We'll get back to you. We're pretty good about it. Next one here. When you invest in a catalog, are you also able to redistribute the contact? I assume they mean the catalog. So this is a copyright and control question, and the answer is no. The assets on Royalty Exchange are designed to be passive income. So things like redistributing, negotiating licenses, any kind of copyright influence, you have no say in. All you're buying is the right to the royalty revenue. It's passive income. Ride the coattails of Sony, UMG, these major companies, collect the revenue. That's what these are designed to do. Robert, Dayton, anything that you guys want to add to that? No, cool. Next one here. With some listings at a 4x multiple, these investments are surely a no-brainer. Why doesn't the Royalty Exchange team buy these? Interesting question. Really, it's not our business. Our business is to host the marketplace. But also, it would tarnish the integrity of the marketplace if we were active participants competing against the investors that we're trying to bring in to provide opportunities. That would seed thoughts like, only the bad assets are going up on the site and nothing is really legit. And that is bad for us. We want to host the market. That's really what our position in this all is. So that's why we don't buy. No employees are allowed to participate in the marketplace either. So there's no, insider trading or manipulation or anything like that. Rob, Dayton, anything you guys want to speak to on that one? Cool.
No, you got it.
Next one here was sent in Spanish. Hello, my question is how to withdraw the money once the royalties have been earned. So admin question. As part of the closing process, when you do make an acquisition, we invite you to our admin portal. It's called Payment Hub. So once you get invited to Payment Hub, you set your banking information there. Whatever bank you set, we send the money to that. For those of you that are US domestic, we can also send you a paper check if you'd prefer. Most people obviously opt for direct deposit, but you do have that option. Next question here. Will you offer more affordable offers to invest in? Well, that's a tricky question. The thing about royalties is that the earnings level is directly indicative of how strong the property is, right? Because it's how much it's being listened to, what generates the royalty, or how much is being used or consumed. So things that are earning less are being consumed less and make them unstable assets, which make them really risky. So that's kind of why we have earnings thresholds that we need to see. It's pretty low. I mean, our lowest minimum is around $1,000 earned over the course of a year. So some multiple of that puts you at, a couple $1,000. But that being said, we're always trying to bring in as many assets as possible for investors to consider. But there are certain things that we need to keep in mind as far as ensuring that the assets are solid. Part of that is a certain level of earnings. So while I'd like to say yes, it really depends on a lot, including what artists we're working with. Dana, Rob, anything that you guys want to add to that? No,
I don't think so.
Yeah. Cool. This is another, what is a minimum investment? Payout terms and timeframes investing in YouTube channels. So per our admin terms, for those of you that are interested, all of our agreements and all of our terms are found on the terms of use page, legalese, etc. Yes, it's boring, but it is important. But our payment terms are that we hold a 30-day window from when we receive a distribution to turn the payments around to investors. That's because we're receiving tons of payments and tons of statements. It takes time to process that stuff. Our average processing time right now is, I think, around like 7 business days. So it's pretty quick. I believe we're the fastest royalty admin in the country, I believe. But it does take time. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, we do have some things in the works that will hopefully speed that process up. But that's generally the time frame that you're looking at. Now, for the YouTube channels, what to say about the YouTube channels? We get them infrequently, but they do come up. Generally speaking, we have to structure them as a fixed return type deal, which is like an advance. And that's because of the nature of how YouTube works. It's not quite the same as music and music consumption, just because when someone releases a YouTube video, normally people watch it once and then they don't watch it again. So the back catalog strength isn't quite the same as it is for a music catalog. So we do have to do that different structures that it's a viable investment for an investor. There's certain protections in place so that, the creator doesn't just take the money and then stop creating content, various things like that. We will hopefully bring in more. They're pretty cool, but they're rare. They're rarer. I don't know, Robert, Dayton, if you guys have any thoughts about the YouTube stuff we do.
Nope.
Rob?
I don't.
I'm sorry. Thought you were just saying something. I mean, the only thing I'd to echo John's point, as for the structure of the YouTube deals that we do, those are set as advances, and something that's important for our investors to recognize that you touched on, John, is the difference in the life cycle of the YouTube videos. Because an investor looking at audio assets can come in with the mindset of the long tail value, future distributions, dollar age, all of the metrics and points that we use when we evaluate these assets for the bread and butter, audio, music, stuff that goes up onto the platform. YouTube performs in a very different way. You know, it
Yeah.
really is the case that that long tail isn't there. You're expecting a life cycle of maybe a couple months, a couple weeks for a YouTube video versus years for a song. And we want to evaluate those kind of, make sure that we're looking at assets that make sense for our investors when those opportunities arise, when they do come up, make sure that this is something an investor can expect to invest in and get a return on over time, and that we have those protections in place, and that this creator is going to continue to make this kind of content.
Yeah.
Because once that stops, then those earnings are going to very quickly peter out.
Yeah. It's interesting because it's kind of the reverse of how we normally look at an asset, just because
Right.
for royalties, it's like, hey, yeah, the long tail, the longer it's been out, the more it's been listened to, like, yeah, it's developed a stable listenership. Versus YouTube, you want to see like, hey, that early life release, what does that bell curve look like? Because that's really the earnings that you're going to expect. Beyond that, like the tail just doesn't really exist. Yeah, so it's interesting, and that's kind of why we bring them in, because like, yeah, there's opportunity there. But again, they're rare. It's just harder to find quality in those channels, at least for investors to really consider. Okay, next one here. Can you receive royalty payments for the rest of your life? Can you transfer royalty payments to your loved ones upon death? Yes and yes. No, I would caveat that with rest of your life means the life of rights for a royalty property or intellectual property. In the US, that does have a finite end. I mean, Mickey Mouse just went to public domain, like 2-3 weeks ago. The life of rights in the United States and largely the world is determined by the life of the last surviving artist or contributor to the work. When that last person passes away, 70 years from that point. So rest of your life, probably. Forever, not likely. And you can't transfer royalty payments to loved ones upon death. For that very reason, a lot of investors will purchase through a trust, family trust, legacy trust, something like that. Yeah, so as long as you account for it in your estate planning, should be no problem. Next question here. Is there a way to toggle between old and new listing formats? Interesting question. For a listing, specific listing, no, there isn't. However, when you're looking at the exchange, there is a way to change the view from the card view to a listing view. There's a little button on the right-hand side that changes that format. So it'll show you more stuff just in a line with specific information. That is something that I like to do just because I can look through more assets quickly. But that's really the only toggle we have there as far as view goes. Next one here. Is there often a multiplier associated with listing? For example, sale price 5,000, parentheses 3.8x, listing number, whatever. What is the 3.8x? So that is in reference to the multiple of the last 12 months of earnings. So say something has a list price of $5,000, it's listed at a 10x. That means that catalog is earning $500 a year, roughly, or just to use simple numbers. So that's what that multiple is in reference to. It's the multiple of the prior year's earnings. It's helpful in quantifying rough returns, projections, things like that. Yeah, so that's what that means. What additional resources are provided by Royalty Exchange in order to evaluate deals? So aside from webinars like this, we do have a page on our blog page, which is dedicated to investor resources. So it's got walkthroughs on how to amortize this stuff, how to read a listing, what the closing process is like, stuff like that. We also do host one-on-one calls with investors. So if you had a bunch of specific questions you want to go through or wanted to look at a specific asset, we do offer that as well. Just reach out to us, investors@royaltyexchange.com. So those are the best resources we can offer you. In reference to this Q&A question that was submitted, are there any books where I can learn more about royalties? There is one. I have it on my bookshelf behind me, but I can't see it, so I'm not going to get up and grab it. Everything You Need to Know About the Music Business is a good one. That's probably the only one I would recommend. Beyond that, online sources like like what we have, those would probably be your best bet. There's a couple podcasts that you might find helpful. I couldn't recommend any of them, but I know that there are a handful out there that talk about royalty investing. Any other ideas, Robert
Yeah,
Dayton?
we should probably promote our ultimate guide.
Yeah, coming
Um,
soon. It's not out yet. Coming soon.
Okay. We've got an
Uh,
older version on the site right now. I think you can probably take a look at that. That'll if you're looking for like an intro, I think that'll do a great job.
yeah,
But I think once we provide the update, that'll give you some more detailed information.
yeah. So that's a good one too. Yeah, good call.
The
Uh,
Goldman Sachs, they do reports on the music industry. Their
yeah,
information that they put out is pretty detailed and solid from an investor's standpoint.
yep,
So if you just Google Goldman Sachs and music royalties, you can probably find a few relatively recent articles that kind of give you a little forward-looking piece.
yeah. They do kind of macro music industry looks. But again, as far as royalties go, it is super helpful. Also, Luminate, they do a year-end music report every year looking at streaming trends, stuff like that. That's really helpful too. That one just came out in January. So that's a good one too. Okay, next question here. How can you be an investor for Royalty Exchange? I assume you mean on Royalty Exchange. Very simple. Just submit investor verification form, get cleared, you're good to go. Very straightforward process. How would you guide a person who's generally new in investing? Oof, that's a tough one. Just because we are not financial advisors, we cannot give you investment advice or anything like that. Again, this goes back to our resources. Read the guides, familiarize yourself with the subject matter. And we can talk about, trends that we typically see and stuff like that. In one of our one-on-one calls, something along those lines. But education and experience is the best teacher too. Yeah, so educate yourself about how these things work, how the cash flows work. Make sure you understand what your returns needs are. Everyone's got different requirements for their own portfolio. Yeah, that's the best advice I can give. Dayton, Rob, I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, just read as much as you can and familiarize yourself with the marketplace. Everything that happens on Royalty Exchange is public. You can see what other investors are valuing catalogs, and
Yep.
if you can compare similar catalogs as well, just to kind of get an idea of what other folks are valuing these at. And I think that's kind of a really good learning experience too.
Yep.
Yeah. Read, research, do your homework.
Yep. Next one here. How long does it take to receive a royalty check? We already addressed that. Breakdown on how I can make off streams and royalties. I think that's trying to be a question of how much they can make per stream. I'm not really sure how to answer that.
I would say if you're saying how much you can make off the streams of assets that you collect on, one, these are passive assets. Two, the value per stream is going to vary by DSP, but we're talking on a per stream basis, fractions of a cent. Stuff gets published out there. If you acquire an asset, you can always refer to your statement and you can take a look at the royalty lines for a given use of one of the tracks in your asset and just divide the plays in your statement against the amount that gets paid out. And that will give you a rough sense of the value per play for a given DSP.
Yep. Good call. Yeah, and it's the only other thing to keep in mind is that, depending on the size of the share that a catalog includes, like that will impact, like for that very reason, right? You might see a Drake catalog on Royalty Exchange selling for, $10,000 because it's a very small piece of some Drake songs. Not indicative of how much Drake is getting from people streaming his music, right? Very, very different levels of earnings. So take that into account too. But you should be able to divine that through that analysis that Dayton just mentioned. just because it's going to be directly indicative of the plays and how much was generated. Next question here, are the royalties paid out as dividends? And if so, how often? So paid out as dividends, yes, in that it's ordinary income. How often depends on which company is collecting the royalties. So like we mentioned earlier in the call, we work with lots of different royalty collection companies. The most common payment frequency is a quarterly payout schedule. But they all work differently. Some will pay once a year, some will pay every month. Every listing on Royalty Exchange will have a chart that will indicate the period by period earnings, and that will tell you how frequently it pays, whether it's broken out by quarters, halves, years, months, whatever. That will give you an indication of when to expect royalty payments or how frequently. And then when the distributions occur, most of these companies keep their distribution schedules on their websites. So if you've got an ASCAP catalog, if you just Google ASCAP distribution calendar, should be able to find it. You can also reach out to us and we'll tell you, but a lot of that stuff is open information that you can just find. Next one here. I see some folks placing bids on catalogs that are not open for sale. Why is that? Do sellers have a set time to reject offers? So one thing we do encourage to investors is make offers on anything you find interesting, just because you never know whose financial position is going to change and at what point. And if we see that you've made offers on a catalog and this person has decided they want to sell, well, then we're going to let you know, like, hey, they're interested if you're interested. So that's why you might see that. People might also just be like, trying to get a deal done. So just making offers. Can't really speak to anyone or everyone's intentions. But that's what we encourage, just because you never know. So if you see something compelling, make an offer on it. If it expires, it expires. If it doesn't, then great. You've made headway. Sellers do have a set time to reject or respond to offers, just like you as a buyer do. If someone makes a counter offer to you, you've got 72 hours to decide what to do. If you make an offer, the person who you made an offer to has 72 hours to decide. That way, you're not beholden to an offer you made, 6 weeks ago, something like that. So there is a degree of urgency for them to make a decision about it.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to that just briefly that anything you see is a live listing is open for offers, and you'll be able to see on the listing when the seller was last active. So that'll give you a sense of how serious they're taking the offers. You can see all offers that came in before, but you can make an offer on anything that's live on the marketplace. All of those are open and ostensibly available.
Yep. Good call. Next one here, question we get every webinar. What are the tax liabilities on royalty investments? So we are not tax advisors. We cannot give you tax advice. So talk to your tax advisor. However, as I mentioned before, this is classified as ordinary income. So you would receive a 1099 miscellaneous from us at tax season. So we're in the thick of that right now. We do have some snippets on our FAQ page around how to amortize this stuff. There are tax advantages you can build through royalties. So take a look at that. We also have an amortizing royalties walkthrough on the blog page, part of those resources that you'll want to read. And we include a lot of the tax codes for that too. Now that is all US domestic stuff. For international buyers, obviously it's going to depend on where you're from. But yes, there are tax advantages that you can take from it. Touch your tax advisor about it. Read the stuff that we've got there. Not sure what else we can say, Rob.
No, I think you covered. I think you likely do have options as far as amortization goes, but certainly check with your tax advisor.
Awesome. Some speculative questions here. What are your future predictions for this market? Where do you see it in the next 5 to 6 years? Well, royalties are growing. More and more music markets are emerging. Music listening is getting into more and more people's hands more conveniently. Digital landscapes are opening up more avenues of music listening, which means more royalty generation. So the future is very bright. While we are starting to see a little bit of a plateau in streaming growth in established markets, emerging markets are seeing tremendous growth. That Illuminate report we mentioned gets into the largest emerging markets. So, India, South America. I believe there was maybe an African country that was also mentioned as specifically growing there. I can't quite remember. Growing like 25% year over year as far as size of the listenership pool. So yeah, it is growing. And then as we grow too, we bring in more buyers, which compete and push the offers higher. Better prices means bigger assets, better assets come to the market. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in quality. So yeah, future is bright and growing. Dana, Rob, anything you guys want to add to the outlook of royalties?
Yeah, I would add that, and I always add this, one of the biggest things that has changed is streaming allows a bit like a wild amount of transparency relative to what the previous model had, where it's, if you're an artist, if you're a songwriter, you can go on Spotify and see how many streams you had.
Yeah.
It's kind of making the labels and publishers more accountable to the actual artists. So I think the transparency that the data has allowed just with streaming has been a huge benefit for artists and really everyone, and by extension it'll be investors as well. So I think that's been a huge change over the last several years that I think will only continue in the future. And then yeah, just the general kind of thought around music royalty sales. Several years ago it was really kind of taboo for anyone to sell their music royalties, and now it's a really wise financial planning strategy, certainly for folks that you see all these giant catalog sales from the legacy artists that are kind of moving towards retirement and trying to figure out what they want to do with their estates. You're seeing all these huge catalog deals happening over the last few years, and that's kind of making it more acceptable for really everyone who is a creator, that hey, this is actually kind of a viable and smart thing for me to do. So I think you'll see more and more deals and more transparency. So I think that really just helps everybody.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. All right. Next question here. Generally curious about lag in receivables, how they are collected, how they are distributed, associated fees, and transferability. So we kind of touched on this earlier, just in that when we receive a distribution, let's say ASCAP, who's one of the companies we work with most frequently, they've got a distribution. They basically just send us a huge pile of money and then 10,000 pages worth of statements. It's up to us to then go through all those statements, ensure that everything's accurate between all the different shares, the royalties of all the different assets that we're admitting for, make sure that all the money that we've received is properly reflected in those statements, and then pay them out. So it's a lot. It's a big undertaking. That's why there's the lag. And then there are, some months where we'll receive a bunch of quarterly distributions, a bunch of biannual distributions, and then a bunch of annual distributions, all in within the same week or two. So that, creates a lag there, and that can cause delays. So yeah, that's why we see a lag. It's because there's just takes us time to go through this stuff. Associated fees, royalty exchange has no admin fees. You wouldn't really realize any collection or distribution fees because all of the statements that we get and present are net of those fees. And since we don't have any admin fees, there's nothing to consider beyond that. Transferability for our purposes is very, very simple. Since we become an admin on a catalog with the royalty collection agency, it's very easy for us to transfer ownership. That's why there's a pretty robust secondary market on royalty exchange, because it is so easy for us to transfer stuff. Even if you say you bought a royalty asset under your own individual name, and next year you decided, hey, I do want to put this into my family trust, also very easy. Just shoot us an email. Hey, I want to transfer ownership. Great. Here's some paperwork. Fill it out. Done. Very, very simple. How royalties are collected and distributed. Robert, Dane, either of you guys want to take a stab at answering that one?
No, I mean, I think it's you pretty much covered it, saying, we're the admin, but the one level above is either a publisher or a label. whose job it is to go out and monetize, issue licenses, receive the royalties, then they pay them through to us, and we pay them through to the ultimate investor.
Yep, yeah, that pretty much covers all of it. If there was something that we didn't address there, if whoever submitted that question is on the call, shoot us a note. We can open that conversation a bit more. Also, our guides, again, and the resources page gets into royalty collection and how all that works on a macro scale. Got some helpful flow charts, stuff like that. So take a look at those. Okay, next question here. What are typical purchase sizes? So that's a good question. Last I checked, the median sale price for a royalty asset was around $70,000. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because we have sold assets in the millions and tens of millions of dollars, and we've sold stuff that's just a few thousand. So obviously, something that's sold for $6 million is going to have an outsized effect on that median. So that is technically what the median is. I would say our largest pool of buyers sits in kind of the 20,000 acquisition price range. So you'll see lots of stuff in the 10 to 20 to 30K range, but you'll also see plenty of six-figure assets. So yeah, there isn't really a typical, but if we were to actually put a median on it, it's in that 70K range, technically speaking. Last question here. How are the songs chosen? So that's a good question. They're actually chosen by the seller. It's their catalog. So whatever they want to include in the sale is up to them. Now, naturally, we do have requirements, earnings requirements, things like that we need to see. So that gets factored into the equation. But also, what the seller needs, like they're doing this because they have a financial need. If they have a goal they need to meet, that will also help dictate what songs get included in the catalog. But ultimately, it's up to that seller, and what they want to do with their IP. So that's largely how that stuff's chosen. We'll offer suggestions, but yeah, it's really up to them. Okay, so that should cover it for the submitted questions. Do any of you here in the call have any last direct questions that you want to ask? Otherwise, we're pretty much wrapped up here. I'll give you guys a few minutes to think about it. Just pop them in the Q&A if you have them. If you don't have any questions, then we can call this webinar concluded. But I'll give you a few minutes, so take your time with it. And again, if you do want to set up a call, let us know. Question here, how long does it take to get verified? Very short. If you've submitted a verification form, then you should have gotten a response by now. If you haven't, go back in your email and double check. But Ivan, I will check your account after this and take a look and let you know the status of your account. Should be quick though. Should be quick. Any other questions? Going once. Going twice. Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. Once again, my name is John Gessel. I'm our client relations coordinator here. With me, as always, is Rob Bernhardt, our corporate counsel, and then Dayton O'Connor, our lead analyst. If you have any other questions that you want to talk about, shoot us an email at investors@royaltyexchange.com. Thank you all again for attending. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.